In the beginning of this year, I went through a phase when my mood was low. So I went to a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist wanted to send me to a suicide clinic. Which in the context of the Danish healthcare system isn't a clinic where you go to get help to get killed. It's a clinic where you go when you want to kill yourself and where they try to stop you. But in the Dutch healthcare system, it's completely the other way around. In a Dutch suicide clinic, they are there to help you kill yourself. You don't even have to bring your own gun. But you have to be able to argue your case. The Dutch only want highly motivated people to kill themselves. They don't want people killed who might change their mind. Now, when the psychiatrist wants to send me to suicide clinic, I get a bit surprised. Because I didn't know that I wanted to kill myself. But the psychiatrist explains that the question as to if I want to kill myself or not is not for me to decide. That should be decided by qualified psychiatric personnel. I will be sent to a suicide clinic for an evaluation. And if the evaluation will show that I want to kill myself, then they would try to stop me. I think this sounds sensible. But what if I turn out to be suicidal before they're finished doing the evaluation? Or what if the evaluation will show that I don't want to kill myself? Am I only an asset to the Danish psychiatric healthcare system as something suicidal? What if I'm just plain depressed? Will I then just be sent home to be depressed all by myself? And all alone at home, my depression will get deeper and deeper until finally, I really do want to kill myself. And then, hopefully, I will get myself together to call the suicide clinic, to tell them that now I really do want to kill myself. But the suicide clinic will answer that I shouldn't worry. They have made a full evaluation. And in my case, the risk of suicide is very small. So as I walk to the clinic, I'm thinking of faking it. To make them think I'm suicidal before it's too late. To make them change their minds. But then I realize that if anyone is able to reveal a fake attitude of suicide, it has to be a psychiatric personnel person working in a suicide clinic. The suicide clinic of Copenhagen is in a building from the 1970s, right in the middle of a quarter of buildings from the 1890s. So it looks like at one point of time the future has landed from outer space. But by now the future has gotten quite old. Maybe it's even suffering from a mid-age crisis. In the office where the evaluation will take place, there's the standard setup for a psychiatric client therapist get-together. 2 identical chairs with a table in between. On the table there's a pitcher of water, 2 glasses, and a packet of tissue paper. I sit in the chair closest to the door. The evaluator sits in the other chair. The evaluator says that we got 2 hours. The evaluator starts to ask questions, and I try to answer as well as I can. As we talk, I begin to notice that my mood is improving. Probably because I'm finally getting to talk to someone. After all, I am a performance artist. I try to explain this to the evaluator. I try to introduce a meta level. I try to explain that the problem isn't now I'm fine because I have an audience. The problem is all the other times when my me and my I, left to themselves, don't seem to be able to get along. But I'm not successful in putting this across. The evaluator seems to get confused by me introducing a meta level and tries to steer us into more concrete suicidal territory by asking me which method I would prefer if I would kill myself. Without missing a beat, I say that I'll shoot myself with the Sig Sauer gun, a high-quality German gun used by the Swedish police. The evaluator seems a bit taken aback by this. And I realized that maybe I was a bit too fast. And probably I should have underlined a bit more clearly that I was being ironic. But the evaluator, who after all is a professional, is quick to follow up with, "So you know a lot about guns." And I say that as a performance artist, specializing in lecture performances, I try to make connections between a rich range of concepts. And in order to do that, I need to keep track of a lot of different stuff. And even if one might not like the idea of the police, modern society wouldn't work without it. There are some emergencies where we need the police. And in the most urgent of those emergencies, sometimes the police will have to use a gun. Just like in other emergencies, we need psychiatry. And in the most urgent of those emergencies, sometimes psychiatry will have to use tissue paper. Therefore, I only think it's natural to have some knowledge of tissue paper and guns. Did you, for instance, know that the biggest German maker of tissue paper, Tempo, is sponsoring the German national football team? But Tempo is actually owned by a Swedish company, SCA, Svenska Cellulosaaktiebolaget. A giant Swedish paper maker who owns a large part of the Swedish forest. So all those Swedish trees, they don't stand behind the Swedish national football team. They support the Germans. And did you know that the Swedish money paper maker Tumba is the only money paper maker in the world which also prints money? Tumba makes the paper for the Swedish money, and they're also printing it. They used to be owned by the Swedish National Bank. But Tumba didn't make a profit. This seems incredible, that you can lose money making money. But it is actually possible. At least if you apply strict principles of accounting. So Tumba was sold to the Americans. Tumba was sold to an American company called Crane. Now, if Sweden and the United States were at war President Obama would order Crane to undermine the Swedish economy by printing more money, creating a 1930s German-like hyperinflation, or by stopping printing money altogether, completely clamming up the whole Swedish cash flow. Or maybe, after having consulted the most hawkish advisors of his war cabinet, Obama would order Crane to capriciously change between printing nothing and printing furiously, creating erratic shifts between the driest drought and the wettest flood, like the shifting moods of a borderline patient, finally causing the Swedish economy to have a complete nervous breakdown. Unless the ebbs and the flows would even themselves out. Maybe these shifts even would strengthen the Swedish economy, like you strengthen a muscle through exercise by having it oscillate between two extreme positions. And like they already learned in kindergarten, the Swedes would form guerrilla groups. And the guerrilla groups would defend Sweden from secret positions in the forest, unspottable by drones. And in the end, Obama's Sweden will be like Nixon's Vietnam, a source of shame and embarrassment, a tiger chili in the American melting pot. You might be right, says the evaluator. You might be right about Sweden winning a war against the United States. But you're dead wrong about SCA, Svenska Cellulosaaktiebolaget, sponsoring the German national football team. Don't you think we don't keep track of tissue paper in psychiatry? You're confused because the logos of SCA and the German Football Association look alike. In both cases, it's a theme of 3 triangles. But in the case of SCA, the triangles point up. And in the case of the German Football Association, they point to the right. In both cases, the choice of shape is somewhat peculiar. A triangle pointing upwards is a sharp shape, but tissue paper is soft. And what does triangle have to do with football, which after all is played with a round ball on a rectangular field of grass? And then the evaluator says that the session is over. Which astounds me. I don't understand how 2 hours can fly by that fast. If those 2 hours had been performance art, they would probably have been painfully long. But with the evaluator, they breezed by like a Bentley on the Autobahn. The evaluator says that the evaluation will be discussed by the Suicide Clinic Board, which meets once a week. Today is Tuesday, and the next meeting is on Monday. The evaluator will call and tell me the result. And if I get suicidal in between now and Monday, or in any other way would feel psychiatrically indisposed, I shouldn't hesitate to get in touch with the psychiatric emergency clinic. As I rise from my chair, I look around the office, which I until now haven't taken much notice of, because I have, so to say, focused on my performance. And I find myself looking at two art reproductions. The kind of art reproductions one usually finds in these kinds of offices. In this case, they show abstract art with fields of color. But the fields are not completely separated. The look at the edges is a bit like the look you get when you try to paint grass, not a completely clean, sharp, divisive line. And these blurred edges greatly come to affect the look of the whole thing. Just like if a person has blurred contours, that will greatly affect one's perception of that person. Now, by now, there has probably been thousands of painters painting like this. But there's only one who's famous for it. Mark Rothko. I ask if the evaluator knows Mark Rothko. And the evaluator says that these kinds of paintings do look familiar. And in any case, Rothko's name is printed right under the reproductions. Then I ask if the evaluator happens to know that Mark Rothko killed himself. But the evaluator doesn't need to answer. It's completely obvious that the evaluator doesn't know. Instinctively, you might think that one shouldn't hang a Rothko in a suicide clinic. But since a Rothko is worth more than $40 million, maybe it's not such a bad idea. When Rothko died, he had 798 paintings which were not yet sold. Today, those paintings would have been worth more than $30 billion. That's a 3 and 10 zeros. Dollars. If he knew he was sitting on that kind of capital, surely Rothko wouldn't have killed himself. So, hanging a Rothko in a suicide clinic can act as a reminder to potential suicidees. Don't kill yourself, because you might not know how much you're worth, especially if you're a painter. And if you're a poet and thinking of killing yourself, maybe you should move into painting. And if you're neither a painter nor a poet and thinking of killing yourself, maybe you should move into tissue paper. The world is getting more and more digital. Even psychiatry is getting more digital, but there will always be use for tissue paper. Because there will always be real tears. And there will always be real snot. By now, it's completely obvious that the evaluator has another appointment very soon. So we don't get to discuss the suitability of hanging a suicide artist in a suicide clinic. The question is, so to say, left hanging in the air. The next Monday, I get the call from the evaluator, rather early, slightly after 9. And the evaluator says, that the board couldn't reach a conclusion. I have to come back and talk to the head psychiatrist. That is, head, not in the sense of the body part containing the brain, but in the sense of head in expressions like headmaster or head office. That is, the psychiatrist, the suicide psychiatrist, who's the boss of all the other suicide psychiatrists. Like Bruce Springsteen is the boss of the E Street Band. Or like Hugo Boss was the boss of Hugo Boss. Or like Zlatan Ibrahimovic is the captain of the Swedish national football team. Thank you.